Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1 of Daybreak. Obviously, I'm going to start off with a little bit of a non-spoiler review, and then eventually I'll make it clear when I'm going to talk about spoilers. But just giving my general thoughts, it was a great season. This show is so much, it's fun, but also what I love too is that even though it does have this fun side to it, it does have a nice drama side to it. There's a lot of heart in this show. There's some serious stuff that people kind of have to deal with, and I like that because obviously, you know, and it's not really spoilers, but it's just like they are kids, but they're kind of dealing with some very adult things, trying to figure themselves out, kind of a bit of an identity crisis, figure out their place in this world, or rather this apocalypse. But it's also interesting because it's like, because what I liked is getting into spoilers, but like there's so much character development that I really loved, and the directions a lot of stories taken is like the way they went about telling the story in a very interesting way. And you know, this is coming from someone who's never read the comic book / graphic novel that this is based on, so it's kind of neat, kind of getting this story. I'm always down for an apocalypse story, but like because I knew immediately that, you know, it's like, oh, just from looking at the teaser and the trailer, like, oh, it's got a bit of a comedy side, but I wasn't expecting it to have the like, whoa, the heart that it does too. So it's not just like your typical apocalypse story. Like if I had to compare it to anything, the thing that comes to mind, and I haven't seen it in a while, and it's almost perfect timing I make this example, would be Zombieland. Even though I haven't seen it in a long time, it kind of has that similar vibe to Zombieland, and I say the perfect timing considering, you know, Zombieland 2 came out and everything. So I just think it's kind of, if you're looking, it's definitely got a tone like that, but I feel like it's on a comedy, like you know, it's got like that feel, you know, that bit of, it's because it's not even really horror-ish. It's because it's not something like The Walking Dead. They even make reference to The Walking Dead. It's more like I said, it's like it's the apocalypse but fun, but also with like some very like character heavy drama moments. I don't really want to talk anymore without going into spoilers, so I'll just leave it at that. It is well worth your time if you've not seen all of it. It's like I said, like it takes some interesting developments definitely as this season progresses, so it is really worth your time, especially if you're looking for something fun. You know, if you're really into apocalypse shows, this is probably right up your alley. So like I said, that's my general thoughts going forward. I will be going into spoilers, so if you have not seen all of Daybreak, do not watch this. Do not continue listening beyond this, because like I said, I will be going into spoilers, so you have been warned. Okay, there is so damn much to dive into this season. One thing I talked about was like how they told the story. I do like that basically we get introduced, it was essentially our three main protagonists, that being Josh, Angelica, and Wesley. And it's so interesting that we basically get their background stories in three different perspectives. Josh, his is more fourth wall breaking, and Angelica brings up the fact that it's like, no, we're not going to be doing no fourth wall breaking shit with my story. And she kind of told her story, and Wesley's was told in kind of like the artistic way it was, kind of like, and I loved it. It was literally narrated by RZA. I was like, wait, what? And they made a bit out of it too. Just because Wesley grew up loving like martial arts movies and stuff like that. And even at one point, RZA kind of goes like beyond just being in his head narrating. It breaks the fourth wall, and RZA's actually telling him like basically take a look at yourself in the mirror type of thing. And I was like, I loved that. I thought that was so dope. Like I said, I just love how they told the story the way they did. I mean, I say that because it's like the story was told from so many different perspectives of like, you know, our main cast to a certain extent. I mean, because you know, Miss Crumble got her episode, you know, we really kind of got her perspective, which I love how it was designed where it's kind of like a sitcom, but it's like all inside of her head, and it was kind of like, wait, what's this mean? Because even she was like, wait, is this an actual flashback or is this a daydream? Hell, we even got Eli's background, which I wasn't kind of expecting that. Also, Principal Burr, I love that twist, because I was like thinking from the beginning, I was like, he's got to be Baron Triumph. But it's like, no, everything was making it seem like it was Hoyle's, but it's like, then I was like, I don't know, I kept thinking it was him, but I was like, oh, maybe it's not. I wasn't sure. I was like, I should have went with my first instincts. It kind of, everything kind of pointed to being like, it's definitely got to be Principal Burr. I even love it. What was it in like the second episode? And it's like, aren't you going to, and Josh is talking directly to the camera, it's like, aren't you going to point it over there to see what we're seeing? I forgot what he called it. It's like, it's something bait. It's literally the title of the second episode. He's like, that's kind of shitty where you like, oh, and he literally uses a reference of like, oh man, there's some guts that get spilled, but it turns out it's some other guy and not the main hero because it turns out he's fine. Literally, it's like that. Basically, essentially, it's a borderline kind of like dick tease type of situation. I love that. Like I said, I love the fourth wall breaking. This is borderline some Deadpool stuff. I mean, and I feel bad because it's not like Deadpool is the only character who breaks the fourth wall, but it's the only character that breaks the fourth wall that I kind of got familiar. And to be fair, it kind of fits this tone, a bit like the very like bloody and just more mature and foul mouth. It's like this very much fits like. But I love that it's not just, whereas Deadpool is mainly just Deadpool who breaks the fourth wall. In this particular case, it, because that all kind of reminds me of Ultimate Spider-Man. Ultimate Spider-Man story was kind of told from like Peter's perspective where he break the fourth wall type of thing. But it's neat because this isn't just one character breaking the fourth wall. Quite a few characters end up breaking the fourth wall, but it seems like it's specifically something allocated to just him. Because more so, like anyone else who does break the fourth wall, like even Angelica kind of broke it for a little bit, but then it's like, this is my story, boom. And then even Wesley kind of did to a certain extent, but I'll kind of get to that soon enough. But like I said, I did appreciate like the Zombieland feel of like, okay, these are the rules to the apocalypse, because Josh is like, oh, it's just some like C- dude. I was basically some average dude, but the apocalypse, this is where I find myself. I'm an A+, person, survivor in this whole situation. So I thought that was kind of pretty interesting. I love that his connection to Angelica. It's like, oh, you're the girl I babysit. She's a bit of a pyromaniac, and I love her story of basically being almost borderline a sociopath because she's so good at lying. She like her story being what it was crazy. The fact is of like, oh, she made slime, and it's like that's what I love, because you basically take pop culture stuff that's so relevant of like slime being a big thing, especially amongst kids. I know that because of my nieces and nephew. Like I know how big like slime is amongst kids. So, and for them to kind of turn it into a dark sense of like, oh yeah, that's how she's doing her drugs, and it's like, oh my god, she's doing her Walter White. I thought that was kind of interesting, and just like how, because she was getting the meds from her therapist by, being like, oh, like lying and manipulating him, even forcing herself to cry. I'm like, that's so psychotic. I love it. And she's also a bit of a pyromaniac. She's in love with fire. I'm like, what the hell is up with that? It's actually kind of sad when you actually kind of dive into her story. I mean, to be fair, because like, when you look at everything in the grand scheme of things, at least amongst the cast that we've kind of been introduced to so far, she's the youngest character. She's like 10 years old, where everyone else is, high school age, or like 18 years, or, they're like that 18-year-old range. They're probably like anywhere between like 16 to 17, maybe, is most characters. So for her to be like the youngest, and for her, it's like she is, she's very smart. She's a genius, but her mom's not around a lot because her mom, took this job, and she was supposed to be under the sea when everything went to shit. And it's like, there's a part of her, and there's that one point in the episode where she's radioing out, hoping she can get in contact with her mom, because she's like, if my mom was under sea, like 3,000 feet under sea at that point in time, it's like, maybe she's okay, but maybe she'll eventually rise back up, to the surface, and then she'll find me. But nothing ever came about necessarily that point, but that doesn't mean that can't be something in the future. But there's that. We had some really like heart-to-hearts about Josh, because because obviously Josh's main motive throughout this was saving Sam. It's because this is the woman that he is in love with, and for him it's like, it's almost like I said, kind of keep making comparisons to Deadpool. Deadpool 1 was a love story, and it's so interesting that they kind of applied that in this case of like, oh yeah, this is legitimately a love story in a sense that it's like, oh, I'm gonna find the woman that I love, I'm gonna track her down, and that, she left me a note saying, where are you? So it's like, hey, like she's trying to find me, and we kind of get their story kind of told out of context in a lot of cases. And I love how later on it's like, when you got certain things out of context, how they circled back around and gave you more context. I even like the fact is that they messed with the intros a little, well, the closing credits, like how they shifted. Like, I think it was like episode 8, the one that mainly dealt about them in the past, so like what led to their current situation and stuff like that, was the fact is that that episode ended on like a completely different outro like theme. It was like white and like pencil drawn, because it was like stuff from like her notebook aesthetically, and I'm like, that's so interesting, especially because like the ending outro like title cards constantly change all the time. I mean, even like how Daybreak was, I feel like there's a show that kind of does that, and I can't think of it. That kind of does a similar thing of how it introduces the show or whatever, like how it, it's like, oh, here's the title card. I don't know what show it is I'm thinking of that kind of had a similar thing, but regardless, I'm going on a bit of a tangent. But I just like how, like I said, how their story was told, and it's very like, because even though it's like, oh, this whole crazy thing of like the apocalypse happening and stuff like that, which I do like, that the fact is it's not like, oh, there's some grand mystery of like, oh, how it happened. It's like, it's not like a Walking Dead thing of like, we don't know how this happened. It's like, no, in this continuity we do know. We know it's like, oh, it was a missile that went down and it killed almost all the adults, which I thought was kind of interesting, because I was wondering if that was going to be the case, because obviously everything I'd seen, because the trailer and the teaser only showed like kids, so I was wondering if it was like that. This kind of very much reminds me of Cage of Eden. If you're unaware what it is, it's kind of like it's a manga that it's basically like Lost, but instead of mainly adult character, it's mainly like 18-year-old high school students, a couple teachers, some like adults here and there because they went on a field. It's a very similar thing to Lost. The premise is similar to Lost, but then it like kind of diverges. But it kind of reminds me of that, where we follow like a majority of like teenage cast members essentially. That's kind of where my mind is with it. But nevertheless, I like that they did, ultimately explain that. And it's like, oh, it was this nuke, and it's just like, it's been 6 months, and obviously everything's kind of, and I do like that they do it later on too. It was like, is the rest of the world like this? And we kind of find out it is. It isn't just Greendale. It's like, no, like a lot of places. I said Greendale. Meant to say Glendale. Greendale is where, Sabrina, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina takes place, like Riverdale and Greendale, so, but regardless, once again, tangents. But I did like the fact that matter is that there was a little drop to be like, oh no, like this is happening worldwide. Yeah, because that's what I was curious about. The entire story will probably most likely just take place in Glendale, but it's still nice to know like, oh, the rest of the world is kind of potentially experiencing this as well. But kind of circling back to what I was bringing up, the whole Josh and, Sam situation. I thought it was actually kind of beautiful. Like, I like that, what I was explaining earlier is that even though it's this kind of like apocalypse level thing, there is some grounded emotion and relationships in this show, in my personal opinion. Like, the fact is, Josh and Sam's relationship, it's like, because, and the thing is, they're kids. They're still trying to figure themselves out, because in, Josh's mind is like, oh yeah, like Sam, he has his thoughts of like who Sam is, but Sam is like, I'm still trying to figure myself out. And, obviously everything went awkwardly and wrong with their first time having sex, because he ends up finding out, wait, I'm a virgin but you're not, so it's like, how many people have you been with? And it's like, oh, does that matter? And so she kind of starts throwing out numbers. Then it's a dude who, the Postmates guy, who dropped off the food and everything, and I was almost looking at it like the way Sam was acting, I was like, oh, is she trying to implicate that she wants like a threesome or something? That's what I was thinking. Even the Postmate dude was like, wait, like he's kind of looking at Josh like, what's that about? And Josh is like, I don't know, dude. I just thought that was kind of interesting, because because obviously she got upset because it's like, oh, you just thought I was this way, and it's just kind of like, the whole thing of like that basically it's like, oh, because if I sleep with a whole bunch of dudes, I'm a slut, but if you're as a guy bang me, it's kind of like, oh, you kind of get it's just the thing of like, it's not a there's a double standard to like guys and girls when it comes to sexuality. Like, if a guy has a couple encounters with different women, oh, he's a champ, he's a man. Whereas a woman, not always, but on occasion she can be referred to as a slut. Sadly, that's how that is. And I do think that's kind of an interesting thing, like I said, because it's like very like, because kids, these are teenagers. They're not idiots, even though everyone kind of want to lump them as idiots just because, like, oh, I mean, but that's the thing. You're kind of dumb as a teenager. You're trying to, like I said, figure everything out, try to figure yourself out. And so it's just kind of like, oh, these are these stereotypical norms that people are supposed to fit in. But it's like, Sam in particular, as well as other people, obviously, using Wesley, for example, it's like, I'm not trying to fit into some like stereotypical norm. I'm my own person, or whoever that really is, trying to figure it all out. and finding out the reason why the relationship, because I was thinking like, oh, you can see like the cracks in a relationship because they were in the honeymoon phase, but then other things like the moment he started being like, oh, I don't like this and that, you could almost look like Sam was getting a little frustrated. I thought that would have been a big issue, but like, no, it seemed like it kind of slid by. But then it becomes that thing of like, oh, you didn't tell me this, I didn't know that about you. And that was the thing, they didn't really know each other that well, you know? And so when he was like, oh, I love you, she's like, you don't love me. Basically, it's almost like you love the thought of me, of who you want me to be. It's like I'm supposed to kind of fit this role in our relationship, of fit this mode of like, this is who I'm supposed to be, you know, to be compatible with you, you know? So, you know, so like I said, it's just a thing of like, you know, it's growing pains essentially. But it's sad too, because they ended up breaking up because he said some very fucked up shit to her, because it's like, obviously he just learned that his dad died, so he said a lot of shit that he didn't mean to, but he was hurting. And obviously that's something he, you know, kind of ends up learning and growing about, you know, later on, is realizing like he pushes everyone away, because the day he lost his dad, it was a big thing because he kept pushing off like, oh, because my dad didn't want me to stay in Canada with him, he wanted me to move out here with my mom. It's like, you know what? Just to kind of punish his dad a little bit, he didn't go on that final trip with his dad, and that trip was, you know, after that is when his dad died. So it's like he never got to see his dad again, and you know, obviously he took all that frustration out on Sam, but it took him realizing it later on. And once again, the beauty that, because a lot of the flashbacks tend to be used for dramatic purposes, but a lot of times for comedy purposes. But that was like a very heartfelt moment of like, yeah, it's like, yeah, I know you're not going to talk to me. It's not because you don't love me, it's because I wasn't here. So this flashback, the flashbacks take him back to moments where it's like, oh, this is, I even love that moment where he's like, no, I'm not going, because like the camera was like saying like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your dad, Josh, you should be dealing with that dude. He's like, I don't want to deal with it. And then like it transitions to a flashback, and he's, as a kid, he's like, you put me in a flashback. He was like, fuck you, to like the camera and stuff. Like I love that. Like I said, I love how they play with that. But that was such a heartfelt moment, because it's like, he's like, but was I not good enough for you? Did you not love me? Maybe you sent me away because you thought, you know, maybe you were dying and you didn't want me to see you sick, whatever the case may be, you know? And he's like, no matter what, you know, it's like I said, he realized like, I pushed so many people away because I didn't want to be hurt, or rather hurt them like you hurt me, by like me, you know. So that's why he pushed people away. It was kind of a bit of a defense mechanism. And for him to be like, I love you, Dad. And even though it's a flashback, his dad turns to him and goes, I love you too. And I'm like, oh, that's so heartfelt. Because also his dad ended up seeing the elk. And he's like, oh, Josh, I wish you were here. You could see this. And, you know, even though it's the flashback, he can see. I just thought that was beautiful. Even kind of using the flashback earlier on, where it was kind of like him talking to his past self, to be like, everything you're going through is worth it in the end, because Sam is worth it. I didn't do this whole thing of making you feel okay about where we're going to end up. I did it because at the end of the day, everything we go through is okay because it means being with Sam, you know? So I thought, you know, like I said, there's some beauty to it. You know, I love how this does seem like it is a bit of, like I said, a love story, a Romeo and Juliet type of thing, you know, star-crossed lovers type of thing of like, I'll find you, no, I'll find you. But it turns out not to be that. We'll get to that much later on, because there is so much to get through. I also love the fact that Josh tried to cut off his arm because he thought this, and even Angela's like, I said Angela, I meant Angelica. I hope I haven't been messing up her name. I kept thinking in my head, I'm like, I'm going to mess it up. I should think, if I'm thinking Angelica, because only Angelica I'm aware of, Rugrats Angelica. Regardless, side note, I should also point this out. It's just an interesting tidbit of information. The actress who played Mavis, obviously she popped up in Gotham. She played Lauren in The Gifted. Like, she was only in like the end of one episode, but it turns out the actress who plays Angelica is her little sister. Well, one of her little sisters, because like she has another sister closer in age. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. I didn't even notice that till I looked at the credits. I was like, oh, you have the same last name. Oh my god, you must be sisters. I was like, oh, that's so dope. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to know, like, oh, you're on the same show as your sister, even if it's just for one episode. Which even that Mavis thing was kind of interesting. It's like, Mavis, wait, you mean Eli's mannequin? So it's like, wait, because even he was like, is this real, or is this, you know, am I hallucinating? She was like, yes. Also, it's a weird thing to kind of draw. My mom does that a lot. I kind of hate when people do that. My mom does that, and it kind of irks my nerves. When you give someone a choice, it's like, oh, is it A or B? And they're like, yes. It's like, what what? Don't stop. Don't do that. Obviously, it's meant to be ambiguous and just kind of fuck with you a little bit in the show, but I thought that was so interesting. Turns out to all be in his head, but I just thought that was kind of a neat thing of just like, oh yeah, like spray painting the buildings to be like a tree and represents all the different tribes, which I didn't even get into that. I love that there's so many, like it's like the whole like cliques of a school. Like obviously in the world, out there in the world, where you got your jocks, you got your STEM punks, you got the 4-H clovers, you got the cheermazons, cheer squad. So it's just all these different groups, and even ones we didn't actually get to meet. Like we typically have only really dealt with like, well, we meet some more, but it's like because like the golf club and everything. So it's like, which that all kind of, because a lot of like the athletic clubs got looped into under Turbo, you know. So, but there's still so many cliques out there. Angelica references the fact that she's kicked it with some of the ones we didn't actually meet during the show. So I just think that kind of leaves opportunities open for much more later on. But nevertheless, what I also thought was kind of interesting was the lie between Angelica, Wesley, and Josh. I was like, dude, her manipulating him with the fake tears and everything. I was like, no, that's not Sam. But the fact of the matter, and in her own twisted way, there was logic behind it where she's like, no, I want to protect you, I want to protect Josh because if he goes out there looking for Sam, he's going to die. And Wesley reluctantly goes along with it because in her mind, it's also protecting, but also it's like, we have a good thing here. We have the mall. The fact of the matter is we can make a good tribe. And that's what she's always wanted. She wants to be a gangster. And for her, it's like, she wants her own little squad. And at first she thought that was the cheerleaders, but then she ends up, because that whole Demi, it's like, no, it's Demi. No, it's exactly what I said. I said Demi. Why aren't you saying it like me? Demi. Demi. And I love it. I love that so much. It was just kind of like, oh. And Angelica went crazy, like bashing her over the face. And I love that being like that note of like, oh yeah, $5,000 worth of plastic surgery. And, and just interesting that Demi still has a scar and everything from it. So. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. You knew sooner or later that lie was going to crumble, but I was so curious to see how long they would keep it up. And, it's like, in a sense, you could make the argument she had the best of intentions because it meant keeping Josh around. Plus, it's like, we have a better chance of surviving if we're together. But at the same time, it's like, well, to be fair, I even love her kind of psychoanalyzing herself. Like, hey, maybe it'd actually be better if I talked about this with Wesley. And she's like, I don't want to do that. And so she cuts that off really quick to kind of be open and vulnerable. Because the fact of the matter is she just didn't want to be alone. And she just couldn't bring herself to admit that. And they were afraid that if they ever did tell Josh, he would just up and leave and go off on his own. So it's kind of like we're doing him a favor by doing this and lying to him. There's the whole Eli situation, which I love. Eli's just this douchey asshole the entire season. The fact of the matter is, it's like, yo, this mall is mine. He wanting the lotion and stuff like that. And it's like, what do you want the lotion for? And he kind of explains it. And it's like, I love that you're saying this in front of a little kid. And she's like, ew, gross. And it's just like, okay. So there's that whole situation. And then just him blackmailing Wesley. And I love later on, it's like, I was BSing. I give you a face like, oh, I know exactly what you're hiding, Wesley. But it's like, no, he was BSing the entire time. Now he ends up finding out. Like I said, he's a bit of a scumbag. And then the show kind of turns it around on you and goes like, honestly, he is a scumbag still, but he's kind of grown on you because the fact of the matter is, one of my favorite bits was the fact of the matter is it's like, okay, Josh is going back into flashback to reveal that what's so important to Eli is his Magic the Gathering cards. He's like, whoa, you can't use a flashback against me. That's messed up. He's like, oh, but the fact of the matter is it's like, well, he's like, I'm going to use it against you. It's like, it doesn't work like that. And they start running through different flashbacks of each other. And it's just like, oh, when Josh and Sam are about to kiss or whatever, and he's like, no, I don't want our first kiss to be a pity kiss. And he's up there being like, oh no, it's because of this. And he puts his fingers up to be like kind of saying that Josh has a small dick. And I love the editing on it to make it seem like some like, I don't know, that some like childish video or something like that. It was so beautifully done. I even love the moment they run past the Cheermazons, and end up running into Angelica and Miss Crumble, and I love Angelica being like, they weren't even here when this went down. Once again, the fourth wall breaking is so damn good. I love it, dude. It's so much fun. But yeah. So I just thought that was kind of neat. Like I said, just one of my favorite moments. But that moment at the end, like him and Eli kind of getting buddy, I love it. That dorky moment of them playing mental Pokemon was so good. And I even love how they represented them being back to being kids again. Because circling back to it, for Eli, his mom and dad struggled. And so for them, stuff like getting a pack of Magic the Gathering cards or shoes, the flashy stuff, it was unnecessary because they were struggling with money. But for him, it's just a thing of like, and I think that's why he is the way he is, why he kind of holds on to it as much as he does, because he finally gets to get whatever he wants. I think for him, it's the whole thing of like, he spent so much of his life not being able to get what he wanted. So having I think that's why, because it's like, that's why he was like, if I had these cards at home, my mom will steal them, or she'll throw them away. And that's why he cherishes them so much, because when he wanted them the most, it was something as simple as one deck of cards. Wasn't something that was, it was unnecessary, so that's why he kind of cherishes them. But they had that moment, but sadly at the end, it's like just when they're becoming buddies, after all the animosity and stuff, like I even love Josh being like, I'm gonna go deal with this. He's like, no, you're trying to trick me, you're trying to reverse psychology. And I was wondering if Josh was gonna be like, I totally got him, and know you're prey and all that. It's like, no, he was trying to go about things the way he was like, you give me your fake Baron Triumph uniform and I'll go to the high school and everything, I'll get your cards and you'll never see me again. But like Eli was like, nah, I'm not stupid, dude, I'm going with you too. And like I said, I expected Josh being like, I got him. It's like Josh being like, idiot, but like they had that bonding moment, and sadly Eli to die in his arms. To be like, you better not mess with my Magic the Gathering cards, because if you do, you don't want me to be haunting you or whatever. And I was like, oh my god, that sucks. And I'm sure that just triggered it more in his mind, having like, because that's the first time someone he's kind of gotten to know died, especially in his arms like that. So you saw him as he was walking towards the school. It kind of triggered probably him thinking about his dad. It kind of put it all perspective. It's like, this is the first time since his dad died that someone so close to him died. I mean, we don't know his whole mom situation. You're under the assumption that she died like many of the other adults, but still, so some other things I thought was kind of incredible was that Angelica and Miss Crumble storyline. I wasn't expecting they're like, there's this witch and everything, and it's like, well, Miss Crumble? I even love the storyline of like, Miss Crumble isn't even her real name. Basically, she had a breakdown in the middle of class one time, and it started circulating, Miss Crumble, and some asshole changed her name in the system as Miss Crumble, and every time she changed it, it would get changed back to Miss Crumble. And the fact is, it got to the point that all her checks were made out to Miss Crumble, so she couldn't even cash her own checks, so she legally had to change her name to Miss Crumble. I was like, and the crazy thing is, throughout the season, we still never found out what her actual name was, so I thought that was actually kind of super fucked up and sad, and just to see her under the circumstances that she was. But that was the thing of like, and I love that being a thing of like, they're the only two like non-ghoulie adults. And I love that little tidbit about ghoulies where it's like they're borderline zombies, but they had this thing where they basically, when they say the last thought that they had before they died, before the bomb hit, whatever was their last thought, they basically repeat it. But obviously Burr and Miss Crumble are different because they maintain some version of humanities, whereas everyone else is borderline, Walking Dead zombies. Burr and Miss Crumble are zombies, so I think that's just kind of an interesting circumstance. But I also love, like, I think in a sense you could make the argument that Angelica's bond with Miss Crumble came from the fact that her mom wasn't around, because she is a little girl, she wants to act tough and everything, which she is tough, she's super smart, but every kid, especially that young, is going to miss their parent like crazy. So Miss Crumble kind of filled that role because, and I loved it too, where her motivation for it too was like, if she can save Miss Crumble, if anything ever happened to her mom, it's like, maybe I can save her too. And it was like, all her motivations were kind of like, her mom was always on her mind when it came to that whole situation. I was like, that's actually super sweet, And to see Miss Crumble kind of progress, kind of obviously be a little crazy, and it's like the lady's kind of a bit out of her mind. I did like the fact is that, we did, like I said, like her backstory being in the form of like, oh, is this a nightmare or is this actually like what actually went down? Her and Burr hooking up, which later on, Angelica was like, did you two have sex or something? Which it seemed like that did, but then it turns out like, because I'm all over the place, but I do apologize. Like we learned about Burr, for example, like him crossing the line for Hoyts, because it was like, oh yeah, like his dad came in and was like, oh, can you change this one thing for my son? In fact, the matter is the legacy of our family, yada, yada, yada. There's that whole situation, and then Hoyts was kind of like acting like an asshole. It's like, oh, you're in my pocket, principal. So the fact of the matter is you kind of have to do what I tell you to do because my family's giving this school so much money and stuff like that. He's banging at school. He's smoking at school. He's just trashing shit and he just in general, the douchiest character. I mean, you can almost say like karma got him back, literally bit him in the ass. I guess you can make an argument, kind of fucked him in the ass because he ends up, that mutant pug, which I love. It's literally at the beginning of the season. We don't see it, and it literally comes back near the end just to hump. Hoy humps him, so it's like, I wonder, did it kill him or not? It's, I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying, like, it just kind of, like, karma came back to bite him in the ass for being, like, and he was just kind of an asshole, hitting and punching people. I guess just, it didn't seem like his parents were necessarily assholes to him. It just seemed like, hey, I don't know. I don't know what his reason for being the grand piece of shit that he was, Hence why everyone jumped to the conclusion that you were Baron Triumph. But I thought it was kind of interesting how that folded into Burr's story, because he seemed like he was a bit of a pushover and everything like that, which I do like Matthew Broderick playing that role, just a sense of like, I love at one point when it was like Wesley and his cousin Emmett, and he was like, it's like, whoa, is it because, what was it? He was like, oh, is it because they don't want, he's like, whoa. It's not like that. It's like, the fact of the matter is, it's these particular things for non-racist reasons. And I also love the fact that he's quoting Jay-Z, don't go with the flow, be the flow, or something like that. What was it they were referencing? All right, the whole like guns and swords situation, because Wesley was all about swords, and Josh was like, oh, I'd probably take a gun, and it's like, what would you pick? It's like, well, if you guys said gun, I would theoretically have to like write a report about that and the whole thing. You'd be kept eyes on and stuff like that. I just love him like running through like, oh, what would happen if I honestly heard you talking about like, oh, what you would want a gun and sort of, so I thought that was kind of interesting, but also like the diabolicalness of like, oh, he took down that snot-nosed Hoyts by getting him arrested because one of the girls he banged was underage. So, and it was also, oh yeah, I wanted you to what was it, like, eat my shit, JJ, and he was like, and it's like, oh, kept getting him to say that over and over. It's like, oh, I just wanted you to beg. But then because of Miss Crumble, we got a full further explanation to that story to turn out the fact is that it wasn't just that kind of made him cross the line. Afterwards, he starts kind of feeling himself of like, because for so long, it's just kind of like, he seemed so meek. But now it's like he started coming out of his shell a little bit more, and he started being more assertive, which is like, oh, what kind of made him seem like a nice dude at the beginning seemed like it started like trailing away, which I also love that everything related to her, Miss Crumble's, like I said, backstory and stuff was in the form of a sitcom, but also a laugh track and everything. It even had that intro and stuff like that. People always kind of brought up like the whole, like, it's just a bit of a tangent. That kind of thing, what they went with, like the weirdness of what they did, and the fact is that she was like, wait, where's anyone else hearing that laughing? That's kind of what I expect a little bit of like WandaVision, the Marvel Cinematic Universe TV show with WandaVision. That's what I kind of halfway expected to kind of be aesthetically like that. Even the whole intro of like you pausing in and saying your name and stuff like that. Which just reminded me of when RZA introduced himself, giving himself all those nicknames. Are those nicknames real? I know some of them really are. I don't know if all of them were, though. That'd be kind of... I think some of them were just bullshit they made up for the script. It'd be kind of interesting if it turns out, like, nah, 100% of those names were straight up real RZA names, you know? So, either way, like I said, I kind of circle back. But, like, she started kind of crossing lines too, but in her mind it was like, oh no, it's all for the betterment of the students, fudge a few grades so the school looks better, they can get better funding. But it's like, no, this isn't for the school, this is for you. And so when she found out the truth, what ends up happening is he ends up basically pushing her down the stairs, and that's why she's crazy the way she is. It's not 100, because the thing is, even with the goalie situation going on, Burr is in the kind of, even though he's crazy, he's in somewhat form of a sane state of mind. But the reason why she was so crazy is because she suffered head trauma, you know? Her and Angelica going through the cheerleaders, because I keep wanting to saying it weird, is what is the word, cheermons, because it's supposed to be like Amazons. I'm butchering it. I'll just say the cheerleaders. I did like that it was an aspect of it. It did seem like as the season went on, I think the more time she spent with Angelica, the more of her humanity she was getting back. Because in her own right, like, the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, all she did was want to help kids. Because that's why she was like, everything she did, you know, changing grades or, you know, hooking up with Burr, was because she never felt special, and she wanted to feel special because she got no recognition from no one. Her students kind of treated her like shit. I mean, obviously, hence with the whole Miss Crumble situation. But she later on remembered her name. She was just like, but that's not who I was. That's not who I am anymore. I'm this new person. It's like, yeah, my complicated thing. But I think she enjoyed being Miss Crumble now just because of who she is and, like, the growth she's made as a character. So, you know. There's everything with, like, Wesley and Turbo, which I didn't even talk about Turbo's episode when it's kind of like, he's kind of like, I love that line of, like, he's like, I'm a man of few words, and he kind of has his hands up, and then the screen just fills up with shit. I'm like, and everyone at the place is looking around. And I love that his interpretation of, like, I'm just trying to look after the kids. In his mind, his squad is kids that need to be looked after and needs a father figure to kind of step in, which I love that his actual father is played by Joe. I'm not going to say Joe's last name because I'm going to butcher it. And I'm going to feel like such an asshole saying that, well, because obviously, you know, he was in True Blood. I feel like there's something else. Like, you've seen Joe in so many different things. Because I feel it's so weird saying it, but, like, he's married to Sofia Vergara, you know. Like, you know, I'm going to butcher his name, but it's like Maginello. I know I heavily butchered it, but you know, Joe. I thought, I kind of start thinking like the same way. It's like the way, you know, Turbo was talking about. Side note, isn't Turbo played by the actor who plays Moose in Riverdale? I think that's the same actor. Not unless I'm confusing him, but it looks like the same actor. But regardless, once again, going a bit of a tangent. I thought it was like, oh, because when you show the picture, I was like, oh, is Joe actually playing himself? Is that what that's supposed to be? It's like, oh no, Joe was playing, you know, his dad, but just kind of like, you know, and it's like, oh, all this like great stuff that his dad does. It's like, wait, what? Who else did he meet? Oh, you know, who else did he help out? That's not it. And, you know, because even Wesley's tripping out and he's like, oh, Oprah. And he's like, and Wesley was like, God damn, that's wow. But then it kind of seems like later on, it's like, wait, there's all these pictures of your dad. Are they either their stock photos or, you know, whatever the case may be? Wesley was like, it's going to be sad either way. Either you bought, you know, either this is a stock photo, which is super, super sad, or it's just sad that the fact is, or whatever the case may be. Like, I love that he had made that point, but it turns out later on, it's like, no, he wasn't lying. He was telling the truth about his dad's situation. I was like, wow, which is kind of sad. Like, he kind of ended up the way he did because, you know, he had this incessant need to win because he felt like if he wasn't winning, he wasn't getting his dad's attention because his dad wasn't around otherwise, you know, because his dad kind of went down that path because his mom wasn't, you know, alive anymore. And obviously he had like a, nanny or whatever, so it's almost like this need to win, and the reason why he pushes so hard, because it turns out he's the jealous type, because anyone that got in his way, him and Wesley, he'd crush him or straight up kill him. That's ultimately why Wesley, because I was wondering what was it exactly that Wesley did that he can't forgive himself for, that you know, at the time he thought Eli knew, but it turned out to be complete and other bullshit. But it was like, it's because of all the stuff that Wesley kind of let so much stuff happen. He's like, it's because of me. It's because of us. We let so much happen. So many people ended up dying. You know, what ended up happening to Emmett? He was basically having to choose between winning and helping out, the team who was going to go to state, but this was also helping out, because later on you get the flip side of Wesley's side of things and get Turbo's side of things where he's like, I need a win. So that's why Wesley felt so a win was so necessary, but obviously he wanted to help out his cousin, Emmett, who was his best friend and everything, so that adds a complicated thing. Which that Wesley moment between him and Principal Burr was so good, where it's like, oh, who's the one that did this for you? You did. And who helped you during that breakup? Omar from The Wire. Yes, but who got you to watch The Wire? You only got me to watch season 2. Yeah, because season 2 is awesome. And he was basically saying only white people think like The Wire season 2 is like the best. It's like you could literally ignore it. He's like, you could literally cut around it and it would be just as great of a show or something like that. And then Principal Burr was like, oh, come on, see with me. Look at like our little back and forth. Isn't that great? I love that being a bit and everything. But I love that. And I thought that was so interesting too. Like once we got an episode where we kind of dived into Turbo's background, because it's at the same time he's looking for a traitor. I love the fact is that he like has his ever since then, every time he talks, we kind of, for majority of the time after that episode when he talks, we get the subtitles for it. So I thought that was so interesting. Because prior to that, it seems like everyone kind of understood him. Definitely Mona and all his people. But it seemed like Wesley also understood him the best, too. So I'm also skipping over it. Our golf team. I felt so bad for those bastards. I guess they're essentially this show's red shirts, that being a Star Trek thing. I use that as reference because that's a pop culture reference that gets used in many different other things. I'm not a Trekkie, so that's only one of the few things I know about Star Trek. Is like the joke of like, oh, if you're a red shirt, you're as good as dead. More often than not, I think that probably depends on which particular Star Trek you're talking about. Probably if you're talking about original, maybe, but regardless, once again, tangent or whatever. But one by one, they're dying and stuff like that. It's actually super messed up and sad. Technically, what was the last one? Barry wasn't dead. He just had his arm and leg ground up into a smoothie. We never actually found out whatever happened to him. I guess like either he just died or they left him there. I don't know. Or maybe Principal Burr finished, grinding him up into a smoothie. We never got to find out. I'm assuming that all of the golf club is, gone. So R.I.P. What is it? Barry, Gary, Larry, Jerry, and Terry. I'm actually surprised I got that. Holy shit. I didn't even have that written down. I know like their names all rhyme, but still, holy shit, I'm super proud of myself because I have a terrible memory for me to get that. Once again, they're simple names because they literally rhyme, but I guarantee you a week from now I'm not going to be able to remember that. But regardless, once again, tangents. But I felt so bad for those poor bastards just to kind of be like, they're like, oh, you need someone to die in the show? Let it be someone from the golf team, you poor bastards. They were already kind of like, which kind of reminds me of the dude from STEM Punk who ended up, part of that thing with Turbo. It's like, oh, I bet your dad would be proud of you and everything, which is like kind of circles back to the whole point. It's so interesting because we got that moment before we got the full like I said, it's so interesting how they tell the story in the sense of like you learn some things here and there, like, oh, get some basic understanding, and then you get the full context later on of like, okay, the circumstances that, like I said, like in that particular case, you don't get about Turbo's background until a couple episodes later, but he had that heart-to-heart, like, he was supposed to read off the cards and everything, but he kind of went a little off script and he had that heart-to-heart with Turbo and they hug and everything, but the dude still lands on the spikes and stuff like that. It's like, oh, you poor bastard, no one walks away from that, situation unscathed and stuff like that. I also love that Terry was like, at the very beginning, Terry was like, Josh, we're going to make you my slave. And it was like, Barry's like, well, I don't think I'm okay with that. It's like, was it indentured American? It's like, no, I'm okay with that. And even one of the others was like, you'll make you our indentured American. I just thought that was kind of neat. I love that they kind of fiddle with that sometimes too, I didn't talk about it either, but the whole, KJ situation. The fact is Angelica was trying to set her and Josh up, which was like, oh, they're skateboarding and everything. It's like, oh, it looks kind of cute. And then it turns out she super can speak English and she's just pretending like she can't. I mean, her reasoning behind it was actually pretty dope of like, oh yeah, people think I can only speak Chinese. They don't think I can understand them. So they're more likely to slip up some details, and information is kind of how you survive in this world. So it's kind of like she used that to her advantage. We end up finding out later on, what was her last, Karen Jane is her name. But the fact is she hooks Josh up with the gamers, which I even love. That was another thing too. The fact of the matter is that Principal Burr referenced the fact is he likes playing was it Sombra on Overwatch and whatnot, but also like we have their gamers later on and stuff like that. They're helping out. The actress who plays Arya, she seems so familiar. I have to look into that. She looks so familiar. I love that when they ended up getting captured, it's like, oh, they're going to be tortured by having them watch like borderline sex education films, because it's like, oh, here's something about pregnancy and this and that. It was just like, and them just being like, and I even love like obviously what it plays into the whole, was it Gary? Isn't that the one who ended up, putting on actually a pretty dope performance, but the whole thing, like he was a quote unquote traitor, but that was something that Turbo had set up in advance. It's so interesting, like little details like that I think is so interesting because it's the title of the episode, but his number that was used or whatever, I love it. Like they're running down the fact is, hey, you actually play Overwatch. Whoever it was is very bad at laying traps. Hey, but it's like Gary's really bad at laying traps or something like that. I love that they were playing into that moment. But what the point I was making is later on when Sam was referencing like her video that she had made, her and Josh, about like, that video that became super popular. The fact is she referenced that specific number, saying that person kind of left a shitty comment. So the question is, we know that, well, I assume because the number does actually belong to Gary, it turns out that he was the one that left that comment, which is interesting. Which I guess you could also make the argument, because I was about to say, like, not unless it was supposed to actually be Turbo, because we know that he was the one behind all that anyway, but I think the number originally belongs to Gary, so I believe that message originally came from him. Maybe, I don't know. Either way, I just thought that was kind of interesting tying that back in. It was like such a small little detail. They didn't have to do that, but I did appreciate it. It is like, oh, yeah, kind of connecting a lot of, dots in that regard. I was actually crossing my fingers the entire season because I was like, I had this feeling in the pit of my stomach. I was like, oh, they're going to do a terrible thing where it's like by the time Josh actually meets up with, Sam, it'll be like right before she dies, or she'll die at the end of the season, which turned out to be the case, but like I said, we'll kind of run through that soon enough. But it is kind of neat that they are reunited and everything, and they're trying to stop, Principal Burr, and I even love the fact that she kind of figures out the whole, like, oh, him and KJ situation. It's like, she's making all these signs about, like, oh, trying to explain what they were doing and stuff like that. And Josh is looking like, I don't know what you're saying. She's like, you fucked her. And it's like, obviously she's pissed, calling him a hypocrite, because it's like, oh, you called me a slut and all this stuff. To be fair, he thought you were dead until, well, he realized that you weren't, so... But still, it's kind of like, I mean, he did kind of go through so much to find her and everything, but it's like, but he was able to kind of make her see how things were, because he left it, he pulls out her sticky note saying, where are you? And he says, he left in one saying, I'm right here. I am here. I thought that was beautiful. Even the fact is him naming his blade, Sam too. It's like, no, I was wondering why he named it Sam. I was like, oh, that's cool. But then in retrospect, you're like, oh, you named it after the girl you're in love with. I was like, okay, that's very sweet. Just because, I mean, I'm totally fine with like symbolism behind swords and stuff like that. I've talked about it before. One of my favorite swords is from Final Fantasy X. It's the Brotherhood sword, just because I love the design of the sword, but also I love the Brotherhood sword. It stems from like Waka and Chapu's relationship. Also, I love the stats. Obviously, the water attribute is always kind of a bit of a sucky situation, because you can't always use the sword. But the point is, I love like there being emotional reasons behind weapons. I mean, because even the Buster sword, like, which, I feel like that got more like lore behind it as the Final Fantasy universe expanded, because there were many different games. Because it wasn't even Zach's originally, but Cloud got it from Zach, but Zach got it from, I forgot, because I've never played Crisis Core, so I don't remember who he got it from, but I know it wasn't his. It was a Genesis or someone. It was definitely someone else's sword. The Buster sword was someone else's before it was his. Once again, long ass tangent, into other nerdy stuff, but regardless, moving on. I do love the fact is that it turns out that Josh knows sign language, and even like the girl he was signing with is like, how do you know American Sign Language? He's like, well, I was a part of this thing, and she's like, are you fucking with me? He's like, no, I'm super real that this was a thing and everything. I was like, that's such a neat little, like, just a little side moment I thought was kind of pretty neat. But initially, it seems like it's going to be them all alone going up against. Well, because at first they were able to, before they were able to get Wesley and, Turbo. I'm glad their story ended the way it did, because I felt bad, because I was like, because Wesley is like, the fact of the matter is for us to redeem, because he went on his whole pacifist route, which I'm actually surprised. He actually keeps that up the entire season. He doesn't actually kill anyone afterwards. Like, going through his whole pacifist run the entire season, he doesn't actually kill anyone, because for him, he's trying to make up for all the mistakes that he made. It's like, oh, he thought he was making a choice, but that choice was kind of taken from it. Like, he thought it was like, oh, I'm making a choice of choosing myself, but in actuality, he ended up choosing Turbo. But this time he made sure to choose his friends. So obviously that led things to be complicated between him and Josh for a while, hence Josh kicking him, Angelica, and Eli out. Which I love the fact is Eli kept sneaking in. It kind of makes sense. Eli would know the mall the best because he's been holed up there the most. He rigged everything himself, which Eli seems like a bumbling idiot. He just seems like such a scummy dude. He's actually pretty smart to have come rigged the place the way he did, booby traps and all that, so it's actually pretty impressive, so there's all of that. But nevertheless, getting back to what I was talking about, the whole Wesley and Turbo thing of them kind of like having to put an end to it. I love that Wesley corrected him. It actually took me a second because Wesley, Turbo was like, he wrote duel, and I was like, and then Wesley corrected, and I was like, all right, it didn't even register in my brain that he spelled that as the other duel rather than the right duel in this situation. I was like, I didn't even catch that. Shows how much of an idiot I am. But nevertheless, it was supposed to be this big dramatic thing, which even that, I'm like, why are you guys, like making this alarm, like making the game like your alarm system? Like, you both can't hear anything because of the missile that went off, but it's like, oh no, you're facing it and you'll know when it's going off even though you can't hear, because the pieces will pop up. So, which I even love that. I feel so bad for what was it, 54, who was hitting the I love it. It's like the line gets drawn, it's like, oh yeah, this is the safe zone. It's like, oh, the explosion's radius will hit here, and then he turns back around and it shows the map and it shows how far away they are, and it's like, oh, poor bastard hit it and ignited the missile. I do like that once again, the little things they set up ahead of time. I even love in one episode they made a reference to like the episode when they would Josh and KJ or Karen were going to meet up with the gamers. They found a post-it and it freezes, and it's like, this is actually going to play more of a role next episode. We just thought we'd include it. I love that they broke the fourth wall to be like, this is important, remember this, because it circles back, because it's what points Crumble in the right direction to find the cheer squad, the cheerleaders, the Cheerzons. I think that's, once again, I struggle with that so much because it just seems so unnatural. Because like I said, it's supposed to be Cheer Amazons, but it's Cheerzons, and I struggle to say that. I have to hesitate every time I say that. It bothers the crap out of me that I have to do that, but that's just, my brain kind of like has like a brain fart every time I try to say that. It's just not natural, so regardless, I'm going on in a huge tangent and whatnot, but I just like that they circled back to that. So like, even like the nukes being something early on where Josh was like, oh yeah, like make sure you're never taking up resonance near a giant, missile that has yet to explode. So I thought that was interesting. That's something they circled back to near the end of the season to a certain extent. But yeah, getting back to Wesley and Turbo, because it's like, the only way basically to redeem themselves is to kind of make up, like, either I come out of this victorious or I die. That's the only way Wesley's like, I can find redemption in all of this. But it turns out the guns were props anyway, so that Plus, everyone else, those from the mall, the Chirmazonians, they're still struggling with it, all joined up because they believed in Josh because he inspired all of them. He was the one that ended up saving them. He didn't kill Principal Burr when he had the chance because it's like, no, like he found another way. Even though I was like, oh, you're just going to drown him in cereal. It's like, no, they ended up locking him up later on, so ended up saving all those people. So, after everything that he's done, I even love how Daybreak kind of folds into the story because they become the Daybreakers. That becomes their tribe, of like their whole situation, and is represented by a sunset and everything. I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. So, but I like that, the end is this like climactic battle, the jocks versus the ghoulies and everything, and obviously versus the Daybreakers. It's all about trying to stop the missiles from going off and everything. The final confrontation with Burr, I love he gets stabbed and he's like, I'm dead. And then you have Sam being like, we know you're not dead. We know that I was there when you got stabbed in the chest and you were fine. And he kind of opens his eyes like, oh man, you weren't fooled. Oh man, come on. I thought you were going to do something. The thing is, what was it he said? He was like, I was going to wait for your backs to turn. And then he was going to say some one-liner. And then Josh was like, that's kind of lame. But nevertheless, it was ultimately an interesting situation. His rationale behind everything, I didn't even talk about it, but Burr, taking Turbo down and then getting the kids back in line to kind of, bring back school, because for him, he wants to bring back order. I even love that little rant that Mona went on about, because one of the dudes was talking about smelly vaginas, and she kind of went on a rant about her vagina and stuff like that. And I love that. And even Burr being like, why do you guys talk about, why you guys say stuff like pussy and this and that? Why you talk like that? And Sam's like, that's how we talk. I mean, to be fair, they're teenagers, but he's all about like, oh, you need to be polite and stuff like that. Which once again, is so interesting and ironic coming from you. You want them to be a certain way considering the fact that you were eating people. I love him even be like, wait, where's all the other smart students? Where's so-and-so? It's like, oh, they're not here because you ate them. It's like, oh, okay. Which is so interesting. I love like this is such a character, development, and driven story. But there is a lot of like world building that they do, because it turns out not every kid survived this whole situation. There were certain kids that died. It turns out the ones that died were the ones who didn't get the HPV vaccine, because their parents, for whatever reason, weren't into like their kids getting vaccines and stuff like that. So the principal, even more so, is like, oh, I'm almost like a god, because if it wasn't for me, none of you would be alive right now. Which still doesn't fully explain like, well, why him? Well, because it turns out there was a bunker that he had basically hidden in, so that explains his situation. But what about Miss Crumble? There was even that weird thing when Miss Crumble and him touched hands in the, like, what was it, the second to last episode, or maybe even straight up the last I think it was the last episode, and like their hands got sticky together, and then they put them back together, and it's like went back to normal. I was like, what the fuck was that? So there's that. The fact of the matter is something started coming out of him, and I love everything coming full circle. Like it was an arm coming out of him, and it gave Josh the middle finger, and Josh, like I said, bringing everything full circle, where he ended up not being cool and cutting off Terry's middle finger. He does it this time, but it's like, okay, so whatever's happened to him is obviously happened to Miss Crumble, because we see that the fact is, like, Angelica tried to help with her back situation, where she had those spots and stuff like that. So obviously there's some mutation or something going on, because even it's like, oh, while you guys have been fighting amongst each other, you haven't realized what's really going on. So I think it's going to be that thing of kind of like, if you want to go, a great running example would be the Van Helsing show, like how vampires have kind of advanced over the course of that series for extenuating circumstances. I guess like there's a mutation to the ghoulies, or maybe so there's ghoulies, and then there's examples like Burr and Miss Crumble, which I think is a thing of like, they're kind of a new breed of ghoulie that's going to give birth to something else, because something was going to come out his stomach. It was a full arm, but it's like beyond that, it's like, what was that? What was growing inside of him? So that's a big question that's left unanswered. I did like that heartfelt moment of like, obviously Angelica doesn't want Miss Crumble to make the sacrifice, because like, we'll send the missile up, but whoever has to do it will have to be submitted to like the heat, because they'll have to do it super close. and, kind of say their goodbyes and everything. And everyone, it's a heartfelt goodbye and everything. And then they're staring out, and Miss Crumble's standing there right beside him. I love there's a couple seconds of silence because she's just standing there being like, and then she's like, what are you guys all looking at? It's like, oh, you survived. And which begs the question, is she full of shit about the whole like turning into mist thing, or was there something to that? Because obviously she tried it like earlier in the season and she just slammed into the elevator door, but it's like, maybe there's something to that. So it's like, oh, okay. And now we have this situation. It's like, oh, the day is saved. We all came together. Yeah, we're badass. We're awesome. It's like, yeah. I even love that thing of like, it's like, whoa. We can stop the fighting. It's like Sam walks out and she's like, hi guys. And this dude named Michael is like, hi Sam. And she's like, oh, hi Michael, love the jacket or something like that. And it's like, can we just get this can we work together in this? And Michael's like, yeah, we can. I love it. Like, it's just some background person you never actually see aside from his hand. I just thought that was just like such a funny bit. I didn't even circle back around to it, but I do love the fact, once again, everything coming full circle, because all this whole, once again, because it's interesting too, because like the whole middle finger thing was connected to the beginning of the first episode with everything related to Terry, but also the allergy, because it's like, oh, his real name was Terrence, the same person that one of the names that he had talked about. I didn't even catch that line that Sam had caught. That the fact is that when he was like, oh, this was it's like everything that you've ever done has always been about you and not the students. He's like, yeah, you want to be careful about, in the flashback, it's like, oh, you want to be careful about the nuts because it's not just students that are allergic, so are staff. So it's like, since the beginning, everything that you've ever done has always been about self-preservation. So that's how he knew about like, oh yeah, like his peanut butter allergy. So I thought, like I said, bringing everything full circle is neat like that. But what I really love was the fact is also, oh, when it's all said and done, it's like, yeah, is it going to happen? It's like, yeah, Sam, Josh, oh yeah, we're going to have our loving moment, and yeah, let's go. No, wait. What? I almost halfway expected the others to say something like, wait, what? He kind of went through so much for you. But then she talks about the fact is, I'm not some damsel in distress that needed to be saved. It's like, even after everything that's happened, you still think of me like that. But it's like, no, but I love you. I care. It's like, no, you don't know me. You don't really love me. Once again, you love this notion of who I'm like, whoa, this took an interesting turn. I was like, I kind of halfway expected it. I was like, oh, that's kind of sucky. What I didn't expect was her to get on the throne. She's like, oh, they need a leader, and that leader is me. I'm like, yo. I mean, it makes sense. They all kind of follow Sam anyway. So it's so interesting because she was so like, oh, I'm not a queen. But the fact of the matter is, it's because of everything that she went through, kind of what Josh had said to her before, kind of made her kind of go like, no, if it wasn't that video showed me who I really am, that I really am a queen. And it's like, the apocalypse wasn't the best thing that happened to you, it was the best thing that happened to me. Because she basically tried to be like, this isn't your story, basically being like, this is my story. And it's like, because I've had my own story. So, because everything was mainly told, I mean, granted it was told from other people's perspective, but this is mainly Josh's story. But she's like, no, this is mine. And all the jocks are bowing, obviously with some few exceptions. Some of the Chimazonians that are there, we see that some of the Daybreakers are there. Crumble, Turbo, Wesley, and Angelica aren't bowing, and Josh isn't either. So it's like, oh, so now you're potentially going to have to go up against your ex in the future, which is like, oh, that's rough. And then, oof, that's so interesting. You went through so much to save her, and she basically sets herself up to be the next main antagonist of season 2, potentially. She could be a major threat because, I mean, it depends on how she runs things. Maybe she'll be like Turbo, or she might be a cross between Turbo and Burr. Because it's interesting because like I said, this was all mainly from Josh. We got to see Josh as well as all the people on his side. Maybe in the future you could see like, oh, everything from her perspective of after, what 100% went down during that football game, which I guess it makes sense in the grand scheme of things of why she was being held captured by the jocks and everything. So that might not be something they fully dive into, but maybe she was always just biding her time for the right opportunity. So the available throne was there, so she decided to take it because they need a capable leader. They need leadership like me. So that's definitely going to be interesting. It kind of sucks because it's like he kind of went through all this trouble to save her, but or at least be with her. But for her, it's like, oh, like you thought this was like some love story. Nah, you got it twisted. So, like I said, I think that was like I said, there's a part of me expecting like, oh, I thought they'd go their separate ways or something like that. Like I said, I didn't know like. I figured things weren't going to have 100% a happy ending, at least for Josh. Like I said, I thought in one point in my brain, I was like, okay, so hopefully, I was hoping she wasn't going to, but I was like, there's some part of me that's like, it's not going to work because Sam's going to end up dying just at some, like, by the end of the season. Turns out not to be the case, but then I was like, oh, like I said, I thought they'd at least go their separate ways or something like that, which technically they have. It's just now she's going to be in control of the jocks, and obviously because of her influence, because everyone loves Sam, it's going to be the thing of like, she's going to amass a huge army. She's probably going to be the one that ends up bringing all the other groups under her, leadership, which there's also another interesting element to this that was never answered because like, Demi was never found. That was the whole point of like, oh yeah, she's gone, but we never found her. So it's like, well, what's up with that? That might circle into something else. An element that's there. It's like the walkers from The Walking Dead, but even less so because at least the walkers are a constant thing. The mutated animals pop up every once in a while, whether it be the crow that took Josh's finger, the mutated pup that pops up twice. Some squirrels, but we never fully get to see the full scope of like mutated animals. So maybe in the future that potentially could be something bigger. Obviously, whatever it is that went up with Burr and Miss Crumble, like obviously Angelica is going to be studying that, trying to figure out like what the hell that is, what they are. I mean, maybe finding out that Miss Crumble can do other things. I didn't even talk about it, but that whole scene at the beginning was kind of disturbing when she unlocks her jaw and she kind of sticks her hand down her throat. It's like, it's like, whoa, that's rough. But regardless, like I said, going forward, we could potentially see like what the future holds in the sense of like the grand scale of the world. Like I said, I figure it's probably still going to be like a smaller scale story just because everything's probably going to focus on what's in Glendale, but maybe we'll get some crossover between everything else that's happening in the world too. I don't know. I think that'd be kind of interesting to see. At the time of me recording this, Netflix hasn't reviewed Daybreak for another season. Obviously, this is a conversation I've had quite a few times. Sometimes there's occasions where stuff will get, renewed immediately. Other cases, in some cases, it can take months. I know there have been cases. I think like Ozark, it took months before it came out that it got renewed for a third season. But regardless, that's me going on a bit of a tangent. Either way, I hope this does come back for a third season because I'd love to see where the hell this would all take us. Like, as I brought up all those different points, I'm like, there's so much. Like I said, it's like this was a very like small scale story and just following these characters and stuff like that. But going forward, we could probably really dive more into the ghoulies because even they were kind of like more of a background thing. Like I said, even they weren't as even prevalent as walkers were. So it was more so like the human characters this season. So maybe the ghoulies will be a bigger thing next season, especially if we find more Miss Crumbles / Principal Burrs or some mutation forms of whatever it is that they've become or are becoming, like further explanations of why they in particular survive. Maybe he brought her into the bunker too. Maybe that's what it is. Because, I mean, the last time we saw her, she was at the school during the explosion. So I guess at some point after the explosion, she wandered off. And, because the HPV vaccine was only supposed to be for teenagers. So, like, there's still unexplained aspects to that as well. There's so much lore I'd love to dive into in season 2, like I said, to figure out what else awaits them in this world, because there have been many, many hints to it. So I'd love to see what a second season would do with all of that. And not just that, show us where these characters would end up, like what the apocalypse is going to look now under some management changes in certain regards, So we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good